Hi everyone, and thank you for subscribing to my channel. Today I'd like to speak about Christine Lagarde, the head of the European Central Bank. Christine Lagarde was in Dublin over the past number of days to receive an award called the Sutherland Leadership Award. This was announced at a black tie gala event in O'Reilly Hall in UCD in Dublin with over 600 people in attendance. Of course, she was announced up on stage by Pascal Donoghue, the Minister for Finance, an able friend of Lagarde, and of course head of the Eurogroup of these European Union finance ministers. What was really interesting with this award is named in memory of Peter Sutherland. And Peter Sutherland, as people would know, is the father of globalisation, ex-Goldman Sachs, ex-Attorney General, involved in numerous free trade agreements around the world, such as a general agreement on tariffs and trade, and of course because of the immigration chaos we've seen in Irish society and right across Europe is down to the policies of globalisation. But what was really fascinating with this was Lagarde's response and the commentary around Lagarde's visit to Ireland. Now, she was interviewed in News Talk by Pat Kenny, and of course, nothing to see here when Pat Kenny, who's also a member of the 1% in Ireland, wasn't going to touch her with any of the contentious or hard issues and gave her a nice soft interview. She spoke in that interview about the pending fears of high inflation. Well, of course, inflation is still rising at slower levels than it was previously, but now we're in the initial stages of a full-out trade war. We can see a massive increase in inflation, more pressure on working class people, and again, we can see job losses coming over the next period of time as well. But wait for it. Christine Lagarde and her European elite friends have a solution. Now, her solution, she said, is to focus on European strength and to be united and focus on the positives that the European Union have rather than look at any external factors. Now, this is interesting because they're trying to push this globalist agenda despite what's happened internationally, the drive towards the multipolar world. And we see more countries pulling away from the whole idea of the global trade arrangements that were there for years and years, moving towards more national sovereignty and in terms of their national interests rather than having these supranational federalist unelected and unaccountable bodies taking charge of what's going on in people's daily lives. Now, she said that they should work on the key tenets of defence. We all know about that. The big rearm Europe plan, spending more money on weapons of war to reindustrialise Europe. Lunacy. But again, we've seen the trade issues as well and finance as well. But what I want to hone in on today is specifically a number of comments that she made about finance. As she said that they want to move towards a capital markets union. This is something I've spoken about before, which is very, very important. This is about moving towards what she states is a consolidated single supervisory entity across Europe. So in terms of it'll drive efficiency. But who does it benefit really when you have this more centralised control in Europe? At the moment, there is an awful lot of centralised power and centralised control with the European Union. We can see that through the legislation and the 70% of legislation which comes from the European Commission at the behest of all these big lobbyists, many who were in attendance at this black tie gala event in UCD. Now, this is about, as I said, a single supervision of the capital markets and the savings union as well. And she also spoke about the sovereignty of the European Union, which is a dangerous agenda. Never spoke about the sovereignty of the nation states or the countries comprising the European Union. Spoke about the sovereignty itself of the European Union and said that there has to be more powers in terms of trying to redirect savings into investment. So people have their money in their savings account, which I spoke about previously, that they'll be try and pilfer it to use it for investment. Investment for what? Investment in the war machine, investment in whatever they deem fit to profit from at our expense. This is very important because also she said that they want to move towards digital euro. Now, this is what I've already spoken about a number of weeks ago, that they want to fast track this by October 2025. Now, this is going to be ramped up and fast tracked through over the next period of time. You'll see more discussions around it, more people saying this is a reliable, convenient way to do business and all this type of nonsense. But it is an attack on our basic privacy and our basic rights. And it's ordinary people who are going to carry the can for all this. not the elites that people like Lagarde were sitting with at this meeting in Black Tie Gala that was held in Dublin 4. Because that's the agenda, to try and raid the savings accounts of individuals around Europe as well. And they also said she wants to remove internal barriers to trade, so the big corporations can scale up more easy. So who does this benefit? Not ordinary businesses. It benefits the big behemoths, the big global corporations, of course, in the European Union. This is absolute lunacy that these people are driving us towards. And as I said, she also said that they need to start moving the needle on all these issues very rapidly. So let's see how this develops over the next period of time. We have Project Fear because of the trade wars, and now we have the perfect opportunity to use those Project Fear and the trade wars to usher in a new era. And even people like Mairead McGuinness, ex-European Commissioner, who's talked about as being a presidential candidate in the upcoming Irish general election, has also said that this is a move towards a new world order in Europe. And also what's important, she also stated, Lagarde, that this would be working towards a coalition of the willing. Where have we heard this before? Keir Starmer, Christine Lagarde, Ursula von der Leyen. She also spoke in this discussion around competitiveness to say that they have to move towards the Draghi report, which is austerity on steroids, cutting down on workers' rights, more job losses. But again, it's all for the greater good, or so they proclaim. And it's also interesting that she wants to move towards a qualified majority in the European Union. This is important because this prevents countries from having a veto. One of the EU27 having a veto on any issue in European society. We also see that now currently with the war in Ukraine. For instance, countries like Hungary, even Slovakia, being attacked because they've been pulling back from sending more money to the weapons machine and the money laundering machine that is Ukraine. But of course, the Irish political leaders have been far too willing to support this agenda. So of course, the qualified majority will suit those lapdogs for Brussels and the European Union. And interestingly enough, she also said that she quoted during this Oscar Wilde, of all people. When she said Oscar Wilde, she also said, success is a science. If you have conditions, you get results. But that's interesting that she quoted Oscar Wilde, because Oscar Wilde also spoke about poverty and spoke about the class society that we live in well over a century and a half ago. And what Oscar Wilde said in one of his many comments he made on poverty, he said, if the poor only had profiles, then there would be no difficulty in solving the problem of poverty. But that wasn't quoted by von der Leyen because, of course, nobody in poverty, nobody who was homeless, nobody who was struggling with the disastrous policies and fallout of these policies of the state and the European Union were invited to this black tie gala dinner. It was only the elites in Irish society, such as Enterprise Ireland, IBEC, of course, the Irish Business Employers Confederation. Hence, we had Arthur Cox, we had UNICEF, interestingly enough, were at this as well. Ernst & Young, Matheson, and many more companies that were involved in the tax scam that is Ireland, involved in the legal loopholes that are created for through government policies to benefit the corporations at the expense of people. And this is what they're trying to double down on now as well. And also, interestingly enough, there was a company called Vulcan Consulting. This is owned by ex-Fine Gaelers, Lucinda Creighton and Paul Bradford, husband and wife combination, who are so the globalist agenda, the pro-war agenda, and they're big lobbyists for the corporations. They've lobbied against myriad of issues in Irish society, such as issues around the housing crisis, of course benefiting their landlord and vulture friends, not benefiting the ordinary people. But of course, this is who they fundamentally represent. So there we had it. We had Lagarde in Dublin. Lagarde herself was facing corruption charges herself because of her connections in pursuing an arbitration case for Bernard Tapie, a multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, in France, in terms of his arrangements he had with a previous company he owned, Adidas as well, a €400 million ruling. But of course, nothing to see here with Lagarde, and no mention to what's happening in France in terms of Le Pen either being barred from elections. But of course, and no mention of her discussion she had, or interview she had a number of years ago on RTE with Ryan Tubridy, where she said inflation came out of nowhere. Inflation did not come out of nowhere. Christine Lagarde, head of the European Central Bank, ex-head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, again, inflation comes from the magic money tree, the quantitative easing policies of the European Union, which has devalued the euro. We see that now in the looming trade wars, and also in the context of the biggest transfer of wealth towards the billionaires during COVID, the rampant profiteering that's taken place in Europe and right across Ireland in terms of the second highest prices across the European Union. But this is really fundamentally what's going on. And she also said that Ireland is so much pro-EU. Well, let me know in the comments to see what you think of the way the European Union is going. Is it imploding? And let me know what your view is on this. I did a poll on my X page a number of days ago, and 86% of people said we should leave the European Union. So maybe Christine Lagarde doesn't have her finger on the pulse, and the politicians are completely out of touch. But fundamentally, you can see through all this that there's been a big erosion of trust in terms of the media and what's being pushed out people's throats. That's why it's vitally important now, because of the power and the key lobbyists that I mentioned that were in attendance at this black tie gala event out in UCD, to speak out, use your voice, have the conversations in your communities, speak out about what's happening, and as well have those conversations. But if you have platforms, use them to speak out and speak up to what's going on in our society, because it's only through change from below that change will fundamentally come in Ireland and across Europe as well, to put the needs of the citizens first. So thanks so much for the support with my videos. Please press subscribe, and also thanks for sharing my videos. I'm very grateful for people who continue to share my videos far and wide. So from Dublin, Slán, thanks a lot for the support. Bye bye.